thick winter night, the castle rises not as a symbol of power, but as a cold mass of stone, swallowing the last firelight of the day. The wind howls through the century-old cracks in the walls, carrying a biting chill that cuts into the flesh, making even one's breath feel heavy and fragile. In the darkness, lit only by a few faint torches, you will notice what ancient tales always leave out. Inside the castle, the cold is not kept outside the gate. It seeps into every step, every wall, every thin breath of the people within. The great halls that seem lavish are, in truth, spaces where warmth dissipates faster than a prayer, where the living must curl up, as if taking shelter inside the belly of an old, heartless mountain. And then the question emerges clearer than ever. If living in a castle is a privilege, why does winter become the most merciless trial for every class inside it? From nobles to servants, no one escapes the cold, quietly sinking into their bones. Let us delve deeper into that reality, follow it to the end, to understand what history so often hides. Survival inside a winter castle is not luck, but a silent battle between human beings and the very stone walls they built. If you are ready, we shall begin. When winter shuts its stone gates tight, the first thing to wither inside the castle is not morale, but the food supply. The stores prepared in autumn quickly lose their abundance. Barrels of salted meat harden like rock, dried fish crumble apart, vegetables remain only in their withered, dried form, and the black bread grows as heavy as a lump of lead. Each meal is not for enjoyment, but for maintaining the last warmth within the body. In the early days, the castle still tries to keep a sense of order, but as time drags on, the scent of scarcity begins to spread like an invisible tension. When thick snow cuts off supply routes, bartering becomes unthinkable. The strong gradually grow weary, while the elderly and children weaken even faster under the nutrient-poor diet. Their breaths slow, their eyes turn dull from the lack of energy. Even the noble class, with private chambers and prioritized portions, cannot escape the cold, bland taste of provisions stretched across the months. Hunger does not strike like a storm. It grinds away little by little, weakening a person before they realize it. And it is that quiet erosion that makes winter inside the castle a harsher trial than any battlefield. The stone walls of the castle are often praised as an impenetrable shield. But just one true winter night is enough to show that they do not protect people nearly as much as one might think. The blocks of stone, dozens of centimeters thick, do not hold warmth. Instead, they trap cold and moisture, as if they were born to side with the winter. The water vapor in the air, every time it touches the cold surface, instantly condenses into thin streaks of mist, then thickens, then seeps into the joints. By morning, the wall seems to be crying, dripping cold droplets onto the floor. Hanging curtains become damp, leather curls, and armor loses its shine from rust. The cold does not only touch the skin, it creeps into the air itself, making each breath heavier, each inhale like pulling a layer of thin mist straight into the lungs. People in the castle cough constantly, their voices turning hoarse, children trembling beneath thick blankets with lips still turning blue. But the twist lies here. The more fiercely they burn the fire to drive the cold away, the more humid the room becomes. Smoke mixes with moisture, clings to the ceiling, then falls like blackened dew. They think they are warming themselves, but in truth, they are being surrounded by an invisible, damp trap. It is precisely this paradox that everyone living in a castle understands. The cold is the enemy, but the damp is the sharpest blade. And if you are a modern person, try asking yourself, how long do you think you could endure a room with walls that know how to weep? Leave your thoughts below. You may find your experience far closer to that of a medieval soul than you expect. Inside the vast great halls once praised as symbols of authority, winter reveals an uncomfortable truth. The larger the castle, the harder its smells are to escape. When the windows are shut to hold on to what little warmth remains, the air inside turns thick, as if layers of scent have been trapped there for generations. Kitchen smoke slips into every corner, mixing with the mustiness from stone walls, the odor of long-stored food, cloaks that never fully dried, and even the smell of animals kept indoors for warmth. The contrast is startling. The place, considered the most luxurious in the medieval world, has air so heavy that many visitors feel dizzy after only a few minutes inside. And yet the castle's inhabitants, from nobles to servants, gradually become accustomed to that mixture of smells. To them, it is no longer strange. It is simply the scent of winter. And this very adaptation raises a provocative question. Did people of that era train themselves to endure things we today cannot even imagine? The living space is not only cold, but dense and heavy, like a curtain that cannot be lifted. So what do you think? If you had to spend a day in a grand room thick with the smells of a medieval castle, what would bother you the most? Share your thoughts. Perhaps your answer will reveal whether you belong more to the modern world or possess more of a medieval spirit than you expect. For the servants in the castle, night is not a time of rest, but a trial they must endure each day. While the nobles still have wooden beds, canopies, and a small hearth warm enough to keep the area around their sleeping place from freezing, most servants lie in the coldest spots, beside doorways, under drafty corridors, or near storage rooms where the stone walls still cling to moisture. They sleep on old straw, damp and musty, sometimes covered only with a coarse cloth that cannot even reach across their shoulders. But the shocking paradox is this. Many servants would rather sleep in the livestock stalls because the heat from the animals keeps the cold at bay better than any blanket in the castle. Within the stone walls, the cold rises from the floor, from the walls, from the dim space above the ceiling, turning sleep into something as fragile as a thread. Just a shift in the wind is enough to make the entire group of servants shiver uncontrollably. And the mini twist emerges from this as well. Whether one sleeps near or far from the drafts can determine who has the strength to continue working the next morning, and who will slowly wither throughout the winter. Something utterly ordinary, yet cruel beyond belief. If you lived in that era, how many nights do you think you could endure? Just one, or an entire dragging winter? On the coldest nights, when the entire castle sinks beneath a layer of white mist, thick as the breath of some ancient beast, people begin to rely on a source of warmth few modern minds could imagine: the heat of animals. Dogs lie around the nobles' beds. Cats curl up on the chests of small children, and even piglets or young goats are sometimes brought into the lower rooms. Not out of affection, but because of a belief, half practical, half mythical, that every living creature carries a spark of warmth to help humans survive the longest nights. In the darkness, their warm breath drifts out, blending with human breath into a misty layer like incense smoke. The sounds of the animals become a quiet rhythm of watchfulness, a reminder that life still persists inside a room so cold that even wooden pegs shrink. But the downside of this companionship always lurks. Fur scattered everywhere, insects from their coats clinging to sleeping cloth, and the mingling of animal and human smells making the air dense and heavy. Even so, no one complains. The alternative is letting the cold claim their breath. In some regions, people believed that keeping a large dog at the foot of the bed was a warming talisman that guarded against the winter's harmful chill, like a night sentinel protecting the body's heat. These beliefs were not superstition, but reminders that humans and animals had relied on each other to survive nights longer than reason alone could endure. Placed in that era, what would you choose? A cold, immaculate bed, or the chaotic warmth of a few creatures sharing the room? Share your thoughts, for sometimes the answer reveals more about our survival instincts than we expect. Fire in a winter castle is both the only savior and the danger no one dares to mention once night falls. The torches on the walls, the hearths in the great hall, the small fireplaces in noble chambers, all rely on the same highly flammable fuel, from straw to dry wood, already brittle from the cold. Just one stray spark, just one torch, slipping from the trembling hands of a servant, is enough for the flames to catch on carpets, draperies, or the wooden beams above. In such enclosed spaces, smoke rises faster than people can realize what is happening. And the cruel paradox is this: water to extinguish the fire is even rarer than the fire itself. Wells freeze, buckets turn solid with ice, and the moats around the castle become thick surfaces of frozen water that cannot be used. People used to say, escaping a winter fire is stepping straight into the arms of the cold, because anyone running outside in only a thin layer of clothing must face winds sharp as blades. More harrowing still, many accounts describe survivors of the fire collapsing right at the gates, the cold claiming their final breath. A fortress that seems unshakable suddenly becomes a trap with no escape when fire and ice tighten around its inhabitants at the same time. Between these two opposing dangers, would you choose to flee the flames or stay and face the smoke? A question that sounds simple, yet for medieval people, it was a choice between two equally perilous forms of survival. Ice in the castle does not remain only in the courtyard. It seeps into every stone slab, like a reminder that winter stops for no door. When water drips from the roof tiles or the cracks in the walls and freezes, entire corridors turn into icy ribbons, reflecting the flicker of torches like shards of broken mirrors. Every step becomes a gamble. A slight slip could break an elder's leg, injure a child, or cause a servant carrying provisions to spill a precious barrel of food. Condensation on the stone walls freezes into thin lines of ice, cold enough to sting the fingertips at a touch. When the weather warms even slightly, the ice melts, dripping into long trails that seep back into the floors, adding more moisture, more cold, a cycle no one can escape. Wooden furniture cracks, fabrics grow musty, and even the chairs in the great hall gather a thin layer of frost each morning. The living space suddenly feels more like a vast ice cave than a human dwelling. And within that chill, every step, every breath must be taken with caution, as if the entire castle were testing who is alert enough to survive the longest winter. When winter locks the gates of the castle, it is not only the cold that becomes trapped inside. People, too, are confined within their own breath and thoughts. Long days without sunlight, nights that drag on with no sound except the wind howling past the watchtowers, make the atmosphere feel as heavy as a damp suit of armor. And then the paradox emerges. A fortress strong against enemies outside becomes an airtight box where human emotions are most likely to erupt. The servant class, forced to work to exhaustion in the cold and deprived of sleep, can flare up over a single misplaced word. And the nobles, those who seem to have everything, face even greater pressure. They must maintain the image of being calm and authoritative, must appear strong even as they endure the same cold, the same monotony, and the same fear of dwindling supplies. Fatigue, worry, and prolonged isolation turn every glance, every small sound into tinder for an argument. The air inside the castle, with no way to circulate, feels as if it compresses every negative thought. Fragile relationships grow tense, and sometimes even a small action, a seat closer to the fire, a slightly better ration, is enough to spark a quiet wave of resentment. So, in your view, what broke medieval people the fastest? The cold, the dampness, or the long stretch of isolation? Share your thoughts, for the answer speaks not only of them, but also reflects how we face pressure today. In the forgotten stories of the medieval winter, there is a truth powerful enough to overturn our familiar assumptions. A castle was never built to be warm. It may sound like a paradox, yet this is the key to understanding why people of that era lived in such persistent cold. If the walls retained heat too well, moisture would be trapped inside, clinging to the stone, rotting the wood, cracking the mortar, and weakening the entire structure within just a few years. Too much warmth was not safety. It was danger. That is why medieval architects intentionally left gaps, allowing wind to circulate, letting the cold draw moisture outward, preserving the castle for centuries. The cold was not a design flaw, but the survival strategy of the walls themselves. Looking back on the journey we have just taken, from the scarcity of food, the weeping stone walls, the heavy scent of winter, the servants' makeshift sleep, to the quiet tensions unfolding in the dark, it becomes clear that the greatness of a castle does not lie in its comforts, but in the way people adapted to what they could not change. They survived not because of stone or fire, but because of their will and their ability to live with nature's harsh rules. And perhaps that is a reminder for us today. Sometimes resilience comes from learning to endure what is imperfect. So, after everything, what impressed you most about winter in the castle? The intentional cold, or the endurance of the people who lived through it? Share your thoughts below. And if you wish to continue exploring the most unfiltered corners of history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next journey.